Excuse me. Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are so glad you are here with us, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I'm pleased to feature two of the most inspiring, energetic, and coolest cats I've ever met or featured on this platform. I promise you will leave today thinking, wow, who knew? And you'll leave a lot smarter and more inspired than when you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and please make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the interview. And also, please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not keep this series free. Special thanks to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, MedJet, Tennessee Brew Works, Project Music, and Cushmaster's brand of CBD products. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome Steve Stewart. Steve managed Grammy Award-winning Stone Temple Pilots and is CEO and co-founder of Vest. Under Steve's management, Stone Temple Pilots worldwide record sales exceeded 40 million units and generating more than $1 billion in gross revenues. Vest is the first music-driven tech platform giving people the ability to participate in the royalties of their favorite songs. And Steve, I want to make sure we parse that a lot today. That's fascinating. Welcome.
Thank you.
Joining Steve, thank you. And joining Steve as today's special guest is Darryl Hurs. Darryl has a 30-plus year history in the music business, including launching and running one of Canada's largest music showcase festivals and conference, Indie Week. In the past 2 years, due to COVID, he has founded 3 new online conferences called Music Pro Summit, Indie 101, and Screen by Screen, and has moved Indie Week online as well as a virtual conference. Darryl is the managing director for Downtown Music in Canada, heading the Canadian operations for Fuga, Song Trust, AdRev, Found.ee, CD Baby, and Downtown Music Services. Previously, Darryl was the market manager for CD Baby in Canada for 3 years. Darryl's had many positions over his career, including venue booker at the Rivoli, the B-Side, Gypsy, Co-op, talent buyer and event management, artist management, tour manager, retail buyer, instructor, digital graphics and design, including branding and marketing for Live Nation as a freelancer, and logo design, launching VIPNation.com, working for U2, Nickelback, Madonna, Beyonce, Jay-Z, and Dave Matthews, among many others. Darryl, that's a hell of a lot of hats to wear. I can't wait to hear about all of those. Welcome to you both. Please take it away, Steve.
Thanks so much, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here. Darryl, he's my old friend, ladies and gentlemen, and one of the nicest and warmest human beings I know. So it's an honor to be able to speak with him today on this platform. First of all, Darryl's Canadian. And if you don't know, he pretty much runs the export office in Canada, which I'm becoming very accustomed to. We spent some time a little bit ago out of the country on a trip he invited me onto, and brought in a lot of Canadian interest and some Canadian artists. And I think he's really at the forefront of a change in international music and bringing in content from different countries and introducing people on a global basis. So one, I want to say welcome, and two, tell us a little more about where that comes from and how your background. I mean, I'll tell a quick story. Darryl told me the other week about when he was working at Live Nation in graphic design. He got called to do a logo for Irving Azoff's management company called Frontline, and I'll let you tell the rest of that story, Darryl.
The Frontline story, yeah. So Yeah, thanks for having me, Tom, and I'm really appreciative to be here and to be able to talk and share some info. Yeah, so Live Nation, I worked on a number of projects with them, and as a freelancer, I worked for different offices, so like the New York, the Houston, the LA office, and they would never talk to each other, and they'd always send me stuff usually at the exact same time, and it was always rush and all this stuff. And whenever there was sort of gaps of work, it always tended to be that I would get the work whenever I traveled. So my business partner would be like, hey, it's slow, go somewhere. And I was running Indie Week in Ireland, and sure enough, all this stuff comes in, and logo design request for Irving Azoff, which, you know, a little bit of pressure to deliver. So I'm dealing with a complete different time zone, LA to Dublin. And I had to design, I think they requested, like they liked options. I think I did 52 logo options for them to select from. And it had to be done within about an 8 to 10 hour period. So that's like 15 minutes per logo. And the next day turned out that somebody had sent a fax out, and they used the stencil font from a Mac computer. And they said, well, that's going to be the logo then. Could you put a box around it? And that was Irving Azoff's frontline management logo, you know, the world's biggest manager consideration. And didn't go with any of the 52 I designed.
All those hoops you had to jump through, and at the end of the day, they just use a font off their Mac.
Yeah, literally, you can look it up. It's like the MASH type font, you know. But yeah, you know, but it says a lot, though. I mean, I think in the music business, that's what we do. We are always trying to strive for, you know, what we think is best, but often we're hit with complete opposite, and we're always challenged by that, you know, and it just says a lot.
So you took a background basically as a musician with a background in graphic design and translated that into, as Tom just mentioned, one of the biggest music conferences, not just in Canada, but I think in the world. And tell us how that journey went from guitar playing in a band called Spokane Jupiter, I'm not going to tell anybody else, into Live Nation, into doing graphics, into building this empire of conferences.
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny that you were able to dig that. I've not mentioned any band names ever, so good work on that. Well, it was like I was a broke musician, and I wanted to figure out how to do, you know, posters and CD covers because it was expensive to hire somebody. And I was unemployed, and I found the government would pay for a course to educate, to try to obviously get a job. And so I went to the government, and this is sort of funny, where I said to them, I quit my job because the singer of my band was starting a record label, and I was going to be the A&R, but that job didn't work out. So therefore they need to give me some money to go take a course, which they did. And I'm very grateful because it's changed my life completely. It was a 3.5-month course. It was Adobe Illustrator, Quark Express at the time, and Photoshop. Being broke meant I didn't actually have a computer, but before the course, I read all the manuals back to back. So Photoshop, the entire manual, the Mac, Apple manual, I read it all back to back. So going in, I kind of had a sense. And the one thing to note is, like, if I do something, I'm like 200% in. And so I did the course, and I've been completely self-employed ever since. And it was only a matter of like 2-3 weeks where I got my first freelance design gig, and that paid a lot more than just retail gigs. So I really went into that, and it did lead to working with some pretty big projects. Like I helped Canadian Tire launch their website, which is like the big national chain here in Canada. And going back, like my first web project, I worked with, he's kind of like this genius, mad coder kind of guy. He taught me about automation. And this is in 1999. And we worked on a project where it was a science store, and they had catalogs. So like one section of the website was 15,000 product pages. Another was 7,000. And we automated it all in 99. And I learned about that. When Canadian Tire came to me, they were like freaking out because they're behind and they've only got 4 weeks to launch, and they had not started their product images, and there's over 8,000 of them. And I took it on and I automated it and was done in 3 weeks. And everything has been a referral. So one client's referred to two clients, referred to two clients, and that's how I got the Live Nation gig. And it was literally the worst job interview I've ever had, and I still got the gig. And it showed me the power of the referral. I think that's, if anything I've learned, it's the power of referral and who you know. I got a call on a Monday afternoon, heard you do websites and Photoshop. I was like, yep. Oh, great. Do you have a resume? No, I'm really busy. If I had one, it's like 2 years old, doesn't reflect anything. Great. Do you have a website? No, I'm really busy. It also wouldn't be updated, so I took it down. Do you have any assets you could send? And I'm like, no, I've had to archive them off my computer because I need the hard drive space because I'm working a lot. And they're like, but you could do this, right? I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll send you the stuff and we'll get on a call later. And this is back in the time there was no Google Drive, there was no file transfer, like everything was done through courier. And they're sending me files, and it's literally had to be multiple emails because the file sizes back then. And I'm downloading and I'm like, this is David Bowie. This is Mariah Carey. Wow, Rolling Stones. And right off the bat, I'm like, this has to be Live Nation. And they got on call and said, guess you probably guessed it's Live Nation. I'm like, yep. And so the first job was simply, if everybody remembers fan clubs, I had to design the fan club cards for all these artists that was going to be sold through Walmart. And he's like, but you could do this. Yeah. And the power of that referral is one of my best friends, Patrick, was the one that referred me. He believed Patrick. If Patrick says I could do it, he believes Patrick. He doesn't know me yet, and I haven't given any cause to really trust me yet. So when I started working on the project, and he's like, good, because first off, this is due tomorrow morning, and this is already 1 p.m. in the afternoon. But when I started thinking about it, I'm like, I don't want just this one job. I want all the jobs. So next morning, he calls me. He's kind of freaking out. He's like, you got to send me the files. I got to send them in for approvals. And I was like, okay, I sent you a link. And he's like, a link? Yeah. Click the link. You'll see the options. If you put your mouse over it, it'll pop out and flip, and you can see the front and the back, and it'll fan out. There's 3 options per card. And he's like, you built a website to just show the options? Yes. And in my head, I'm like, yes, I want all the jobs. So he said, Live Nation's going to like this. He sent it in, and then they came back and said, can you build the microsite for Walmart to sell the cards? Yes. And then after we finished that, I got a call and said, we need to have a conference call with LA and India. And that turned into, can you build VIPnation.com? So it went from club card to microsite to big project. And then that turned into, I think I worked for them about 8 or 9 years, did a lot of their marketing assets that was sent to regional territories. And then it turned into branding. So then we actually rebranded Live Nation. If anybody remembers, there's a moment where it was a ticket was a logo. We did that whole phase. And then I remember one day got this frantic call, like, we need to do a press release like now. And they wanted me to design it in Microsoft Word. And I'm like, you don't design in Microsoft Word, like graphics and stuff. And they're like, yes, but this has to go out. And it was the press release for the merger or the acquisition of Ticketmaster. And so it was no pressure, because it's like, this needs to go out now. And I'm the one struggling trying to do this in Word. And I managed to get it out. Yeah, so it was quite the ride with Live Nation, and just sort of learned a lot about, like I said, the power of referrals. And Tom, I'm sure you know a lot about that in headhunting and job placements, and then also delivering on time under pressure and over delivering. And I've tried to keep that mantra with me throughout. And through all that, I was able to apply it to building digital spaces online with my background. When COVID hit, it was really like we were close, like we were about 2 weeks away from closing Indie Week for good. We lost clients. Like at the time, we were programming for Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment. So after every home NHL game, we were programming the artists to perform. So we lost that contract when NHL canceled because of COVID. And then we lost being able to do a live in-person festival because of COVID. And we kind of fell through the cracks for any kind of COVID funding relief. We only received $5,000 for the entire year. So had to figure out sponsorships real quickly. And thankfully, our sponsors are great and they got us through. But building the digital space.
Let's talk about that for a second. I just want to jump in. So Canadian Music Week prior to the COVID was, and I don't know if they still are, because I don't think they are, but they're like the big Canadian festival, right? And it was all in person. And Indie Week, because I came up and saw you in Toronto for one of those in person. And then COVID happens, everybody shut down, no one can meet in person anymore. You had the skill set from what you just described with Live Nation and building websites and getting graphics done to jump in quickly and garner an audience online, which I don't think Canadian Music Week had the wherewithal to do that. And you were able to transfer your interests and your audience into an online conference. And now you've done, I think, almost hundreds of them, right? I mean, it's, what was that like? Like you're getting to where you're at the bottom, you're thinking, wow, everything's closing down. What are my options? And how did that work for you to become probably, well, not probably, the preeminent online music conference in Canada and maybe in the world?
Yeah, well, it was the first thing you have to look at is the user experience. And I think a lot of people take what they do in person and try to replicate it online when it's a totally different medium. And you have to look at how you're delivering the content, and it also has to be entertaining. Like people are watching a screen. So yes, you're giving information, but you have to entertain as well. And we really weren't sure. And when we finally made the decision to say, yes, we're going to produce an online conference, we made the quick decision to say, yes, we're 200% in on this, not we're only doing this until we can't do it, or we're hoping to do live, but we'll do this instead. Like those come across as Band-Aid solutions, and the public knows it. So we wanted to show confidence, and we wanted to produce the best interactive experience that we could. And we feel that we've almost exceeded what you can do in person because we've had so many international connections as a result. To do the marketing for it, because we, again, as well, normally we're planning out a conference a year out. This is July, and our first conference is October. So we're already down that lead up time, but also who are the speakers, what are the topics? So what we started was Indie Weekly, which is we're still doing every Tuesday at 4:00. It's a free session. It gave us something to market, and it gave us something for people to start joining in. And it's just 1 hour a week, and it's free. And people started signing up. And that also allowed us that we built an email list because people had to sign up, which allowed us then to start marketing tickets for Indie Week when we put it on sale. And it was kind of the funny thing. It's totally against what we're used to. You know, we announced dates, tickets on sale. Here's what we're going to do. This was literally tickets on sale. We don't know what we're going to do, but here's the dates. And tickets sold like day one. And we're seeing ticket sales right away. And we had nothing other than dates. And so it gave us confidence right away. And one thing I know in building websites is it's actually, I find, more to the advantage to not have everything built when you launch and kind of keep adding to the story. And the users are part of that story, and they love to see that growth. And so as we built Indie Week, we're announcing, oh, we've got this speaker, here's this panel. People really started ramping up in purchasing tickets or redemptions. And once we finished the first one, the response was so overwhelmingly positive that I was like, we cannot wait 12 months. We will lose momentum. Let's create another online conference for February, which was screen by screen. and to try to figure out what subject matter, if we can be the first out of the gate in the year to do music and tech, because tech is hot. And so that's what we were. And we were able to get top level speakers, John V from Roblox, Museo, Mideo. So many people are so willing to share information online that it's actually, we've been able to get higher level speakers from around the world.
It's probably easier and more convenient than flying somebody in, and their schedules tend to work better because they can spend an hour versus having to travel for 2 or 3 days. But you said something important. You provided value, right? You gave with your Indie Week programming, you're giving people free content on a weekly basis, right? Which gives them an opportunity to learn something, to absorb, and to join your network. And then, like you said, you took that network and slingshotted that off into your full program. But that's a lot to learn quickly, Darryl. I mean, that's not everybody can take off and pivot like that and build. So tell us more about the international stuff, because I'm really intrigued at how quickly you were able to relate to export offices, not only within Canada, but within other countries. And I know you've traveled extensively through Europe and Latin America, especially. But how are those things going, and where are the relationships falling in for your international stuff?
Yeah, well, I have been lucky to be on the conference trail a number of years and have those connections. To provide value to users, it's kind of like, what is their pain point? And with artists and such, especially during COVID, while you're locked down, they want to meet people that they don't know. So international is a huge, attractive subject matter for artists, managers, labels. And so we really focused on that for the Indie Week conference. And we sort of have this saying now, meet online to do business in person. And we've been able to start actually having tangible results. Just example, this last Tuesday, a couple of days ago, we had people on from Portugal, from Romania, from Sweden, from Brazil, all tuning into this free session and contributing to the conversation. But what's happened is artists are now collaborating. They meet in the chat and they're actually releasing music together. An artist met an NFT marketplace that's located in Brazil, and they're releasing NFTs on their platform. But also we've had bookers do B2B meetings with artists, and we've had artists booked in Thailand, and we just got back from Brazil. We had presented 2 artists there as a result. So we are working to make those connections online that leads to real business. And we've seen people actually get hired too. Like they got jobs by the companies that they've met through our system.
Tiago just reached out and said hello to us from Brazil. We met him. He's a graphic designer and an artist down there. So what's up, Tiago?
Amazing graphic artist too.
Absolutely. Okay, so you're now building not just one conference, but it's a chain of conferences that are interrelated. Some of it's tech, some of it's music, some of it's film. How does that evolve over the next 12 to 24 months? I mean, do you see growth in certain verticals, or are you just going to keep doing what you're doing, or what's on the agenda?
Yeah, so just to sort of say about the 4 conferences, what really sort of made sense is that we didn't try to do the conference online as we would. You go to a hotel, usually take over, and there's multiple rooms going on. That's just too much for an online audience. So we actually took what we normally did and kind of took it into 4 subject tracks. So music and tech, education, international, and industry discussions that's high level, more like strategy and data and such. So it's taking that one main one we normally would do, split it into the 4. And what we're working on now is we're actually working on a platform to build an online community, and it's going to be like Facebook, but for music. So we've got this whole audience in all these different territories, and we've also been working with schools across North America. We want access to students, so we've actually been building a database of all the schools, and we're actually working into Europe and UK as well. So we're looking to take our audience and move them all into one space, because each time it's a different place in the app for the online conference. But now we're going to have them in one space. We'll end up hosting our Indie Weekly there, and we've got a lot of things planned as far as how to educate the artists, how to get the managers connected. There's so many things that we could do, but again, just think of Facebook for music, and that's what we're working on right now.
That's amazing. And I think you're right. There's not a one place, one-stop shop for resources for a lot of creatives and musicians in particular. They're still looking on YouTube, they're looking on Instagram, they're looking on TikTok. They're finding different pieces in different places. But I think if you have a repository with credible professionals or experienced musicians that have gone through a lot of the situations that young and up-and-comers might find themselves in, you're providing a lot of value, right? They can skip over some of the problem areas and maybe take advantage of some resources that other people know about. But I think there's a lot to be said about having it all in one place and then separating out the verticals per interest.
Absolutely. And plus the other thing is everything we've done online is recorded. So we're sitting on a mountain of video content, and a lot of it is how-tos and like we've had software platforms that take people through the platform, like Foundy, and we're working on one with Fuga. And so it's like we're able to actually show how to use these online tools, which will be an asset to any member of our community.
And how does it work with your sponsors? You mentioned earlier they keep coming back. Was it hard to actually bring on the initial batch of sponsors? Or, I mean, it sounds like that relationship keeps getting better.
Yeah, I got to say thanks to all our sponsors and partners, because they're the ones that got us through that first year. And what's been really funny is I've been really busy to like follow up and say, okay, it's a new year, let's renew. They'll come back to us and they'll go, it's time for us to renew. And in a number of cases, they've increased their budget for us because of the value that they've seen in the responses to it. And before, it would be they would sponsor one event one time a year. By having ongoing dialogue, where first conference they could present a panel with a certain topic, second conference another panel, so they're actually building the story of their brand throughout the entire year. And I've started seeing our audience actually in the chats, if somebody had a question about, say, Bandzoogle, our audience is already answering the questions because they now know the answers. And I feel that that's really powerful. So yeah, a lot of our sponsors have always, like, they've all come back, and they've in some cases they've increased sponsorship because it's an ongoing, the online space is where you're building relationships. So it's kind of going back to what I said before about who you know, and it's building relationships of the brand through storytelling. And I think that that is really important, because people start then adapting to trying their service, trying the tools and such, but they also get confidence in it. And I think that's the key point.
And the other thing I think is, like you said earlier, you're bringing people together in a community, right? And it's one thing to learn online one-to-one, where you're logging into a site, you're getting information back. But when you feel like there's other people in the room, you can do something together, you can bounce questions back and forth in a chat or a virtual chat. There's a lot of value to that. And the collaboration that comes from that, I think is very relevant to musicians in particular.
Oh, absolutely. But it's also, it scales up. Like, I mean, managers, record labels, producers, they've all been part of our audience as well. And like, we did one Indie Weekly with a number of producers on it, and one text messaged me right after, and he said, I got 4 clients off that call in 1 hour. And we've got so many testimonials. In fact, I just got a text just before from Robert Singerman, who's in Sweden right now. And he just, like, no joke, just said, David Silva from Summerfest just talked about Indie Week, about how he booked a band that he met. So, and I believe it was Peak Jacks from Italy that just played Summerfest. So we're starting now to almost, I kid you not, every 2 days, we're getting some random message in, hey, this happened as a result. And for us, that's really important, because we do rely on government funding, and we need to show those kind of results. But it's literally every 2 days we're getting messages in, and it's people I don't know a lot of times either, just saying thanks.
That's the best, right? It's organic. It's not like someone's asking you for an opinion. They're giving it because it's coming from here. Um, let's talk about, you. You're also an executive at Downtown in Canada. You're a managing director, I believe. And I don't know if that came through CD Baby, or tell us about that little path.
Sure. Well, it's all tied together. I went on a trade mission to South America. I just mentioned Robert Singerman. It was his trade mission, CAB, Chile, Argentina, Brazil. And it was also funded by SEMA. So half of my costs were covered and such. And I really took it on to be, again, 100% in. I was the only one that went to every conference. I spoke in 2 conferences in Chile, 1 in Argentina, 2 in Brazil. And I really took it on to meet as many people as possible. And what was interesting is I met the CD Baby reps in every territory. And I was running Indie Week in UK, and the promoter I hired there got CD Baby to sponsor Indie Week UK. And got to know that there's a new international team. So I invited the director for the international team to be a speaker at Indie Week. And after, he was like, wow, Canada's really got a lot going on. This is really cool. Do you know anybody that you think would be a good rep for us? And I put myself forth and said, I would be up for that. And so that's how I got into the CD Baby. And that's the thing about it. Everything is very symbiotic, because through Indie Week, I'm making so many connections. And strategically, there's times it's like, if I don't know somebody and feel we really should connect, I ask them to be a speaker. And then one thing that's also kind of been, I think, more advantageous than the in real person type of conferencing is we have these Zoom calls leading up to the conference and then post conference, and it's really easy. We don't have to fly, and we actually build relationships, like true friendships, through these Zoom calls. So our international connections have just exploded during this time.
That's amazing. And then the downtown angle, how did that work out of CD Baby? How did that happen?
Yeah, so I was with CD Baby for a number of years, and Downtown acquired CD Baby, and I was part of the international team, which then got elevated into being part of Downtown Global. Went from basically representing CD Baby in Canada to representing the Downtown brands in Canada.
Interesting. I mean, and I know those guys, they've sold off a lot of their catalog, and they're still operating, and they're still kind of regrouping. It seems in a label services company, at least in the US. Okay,
Yeah.
let's
talk about. If I could mention a thing about it is essentially like Downtown. What's amazing is that there's been a number of acquisitions, but really it's wherever you're at in your career path, we're providing a solution from that DIY artist at that CD Baby level to an artist that's at a larger level that requires more of a hands-on approach with DMS, to a record label with a full catalog for distribution and marketing. And that's really the goal, is we want to be able to provide answers for people at whatever level that they're at in their music career.
I've had this question asked of me a couple times, because I've got a management background, but what would you say to a new artist that was coming up today? Do you think it's necessary to actually sign a label deal, a traditional label deal?
I think it really depends on what resources you have. What are your team members? I think that there's some artists and creators that really just want to focus on the art and the creation and not the business. And they really do need a team around them that can help navigate, because as you know, it is a business to be navigated and with strategy and such. But I think it's really important to know who you are first, what are your goals, and I think that starts help dictating your path, and what resources do you have or don't have.
Yeah, I mean, to me, at least at the major label level, it seems like it's the hit factory, and they're only looking for someone that's got the potential to be, a pop star. Um, and if it's not in that channel, they're probably not going to pay attention. And if they do, you still might be an outlier. But there are so many resources today. We're just talking about it, especially with label service companies like you mentioned, where you can buy a publicist, you can buy promotions, you can buy a sales guy if you need a salesperson, you can buy anything you like on a piecemeal basis. So you don't have to give up, 85% of your income to a label and a lot of control, probably all of your control, to a company that, that may have your back and may not. I've seen it go both ways. And like you said, it's not just navigating. You have to fight to become a priority. I remember, with the Stone Temple Pilots guys, they all thought they'd made it when they signed a deal. I said, that's just the beginning. We haven't even started. And sitting in Atlantic Records building in New York and working that building day in and day out, week in and week out, that was my job. It wasn't really, there's hand holding and babysitting, but a lot of it was making that artist a priority at that label, right? They had 200 other acts signed. How do you have your artist become the topic in every meeting, right? At the top of the budget, et cetera. That's the work I think that a good manager has to do. But I also think nowadays those times have changed, and you can, come in with 20 million views on YouTube or on Instagram or on TikTok, and that is enough to grease those wheels and bring partnerships in place and actually monetize. So I think it's a little bit different, but I'm just curious as to what you thought about the label services environment.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing is, like, artists could have that choice now to decide whether they want a label or they don't want a label. And in Canada, the other part is that there's a lot of funding available here. And I really feel a lot of artists and people in the business are still in the dark as to how to navigate that space about how to get funds, but it is here. And a lot of artists should be their own label until they really need it. Because if they're operating their own label, then there's a chance they can get funding and sponsorship and partnerships about the label. And if you look at the hip hop world, hip hop, like rock was my era. I grew up in the 80s and such. And then there was this shift to hip hop. And if you watched and studied it, an artist would come out, from the underground, and all of a sudden now they've made it, but then they start teaching others also how to make it, but they bring them up under their label, but show them how to make their own label, and they all get pieces of the pie. And that's why you'll see sometimes, how many songwriters are on this, 13, and they make sure everybody's taken care of. And there's this real education piece, right? And the evolution of hip hop is a series on Netflix that I really recommend everybody to watch, because it's really demonstrating success stories in different cities of America in hip hop, but each territory has their own flavor, own sort of spin on the genre, but success stories. And a lot of it is, we did this together, we brought this up, we made our own label, we brought in writers, we brought in producers, but then we showed others how to do the same and replicate it. So I think there's a power in that.
It's Netflix, right? It's the
Netflix.
it is interesting. I agree. Even with Vest, we saw early adoption from hip hop artists, and just because the reason you mentioned it was collaboration. And you'll see in a lot of titles it'll say featuring so and so, right? They'll bring up another artist or someone in their camp and give them a spotlight as well, which you didn't see a lot of very few rock acts or pop acts or country acts ever doing that. So I think a lot of that street scrappiness translates into the music business, because it is kind of a dog eat dog environment sometimes, as well as the ability to collaborate and the openness to collaborate and share, like you mentioned, because I think that's a key to moving ahead today, right? If you're an isolated artist and you're only writing for yourself, you don't want to work with anybody else, you're going to have a much tougher time finding success than I think if you are more open and have the ability to collaborate and the openness to give up some of that.
Yeah, and I actually want to bring up a phrase that we've been using as we've built our online presence. And pretty much kind of how we approach things is people add value. And, I've done artist consulting and such, and how do I get more people to your shows? Well, more people. How do I sell more tickets? More people. How do I get more streams? People. And the bottom line dollar is, how do I get more money? People. Money has to come from somewhere. So we focus on people. And we email directly often. We send information. We've contacted schools, and I really still believe that, yes, we're in a digital space, but ultimately it's people that is your audience, and you got to focus on your audience. And how can you turn a fan into a super fan? I've broken down a ton of numbers, and I've got this chart that I've worked together on, where what's the value of one person, and if you've got a target number, how much you want to make a year, how many people do you need to get there, and how many pieces do you need to sell or monetize to actually get there? And it's quite interesting to break it down. And I'm saying this because I also want you to share a story about how, and we've talked about it before, Stone Temple Pilots. How did you increase their audience? And the story I'm talking about.
I do. Yeah, it was, again, this was 1992. The first record came out in September. And I was able to put in the CD booklet a little PO box for fan club back in the day, where people had fan clubs that were, physical mailboxes. And we got a lot of mail came in. I mean, we would get, tubs of mail every week from the post office box. And I would bring it back. The record just came out. The band had zero indie cred. They didn't do any indie records. They hadn't really toured as of yet. And it was early days, but hundreds of letters were coming in every week. And I would sit them down and go, hey guys, we're going to go through all this mail, and we're going to make this easy. We're going to pull out all the stuff that has a phone number, right? So we went through and sorted the mail, and every probably fifth letter or postcard had a phone number on it. And I said, we're going to sit down, and you guys are going to call these phone numbers every week. And they, at first, like, what are you talking about? I said, think about this. Who's writing these letters, right? They're generally school kids, right? They're in junior high or high school. They're fans that took enough time to buy your record, because that's the only way they have the address, listen to your music, and then write you a letter on a piece of paper, put a stamp on it, and mail it. They're invested, right? They already your fans. You know that. How do you reach out to them, right? So we start calling them. And it was amazing. Scott Weiland, who's the lead singer, picked up the phone and called this guy. And it was a high school kid. And the kid didn't believe it was him, right? And he was like, what? He goes, yeah, this is Scott Weiland from Stone Temple Pilots. Just want to say thank you for taking the time to write us. The kid was blown away. And after a couple of those calls, the band actually started to enjoy it, because they realized they were talking to real fans. And I said, after the first week, I said, how many people do you think you talked to that last week? And they go, I don't know, 50, 100 people. I said, okay. How many people do you think those people told that they got a call from their favorite artist, a phone call? And they're like, oh, because I said, I bet they went back to their junior high or high school that next day and told 10 of their friends, who told 10 of their friends. And you probably had 500 or 600 people at each school talking about you and your band and your music, because of that couple hours of time it took you to call those people. So it was guerrilla marketing way back in the day, before there was, email blasts and that kind of stuff. But I think it was really effective, and it was certainly personal, right? Those fans will never forget getting a call from somebody that's on a record that they just bought. That was kind of novel back then.
Yeah, I love that story. And like, it really resonates with me, because I did something similar with a band that moved from Saskatchewan to Toronto, and knew not one person other than me. And they hired me to help them out. And I introduced them to the owner of the bar that I thought was the best bar for them. And I introduced them saying, his name was Darryl as well. I said, Darryl, this is a band that's selling out your bar in October. And he's like, sure they are. Yeah, never heard of them. And the strategy was this. And the singer, I got to give him credit, because he was really detailed and he really took it to a different level. But I'm like, all you have to do is this. And I've got this sort of formula I use in developing young artists, and how to get to be a buzz band in 6 to 12 months in their local market without having to spend a ton of money. It's just time. And so there's 4 people in the band, 1 hour a day, messaging people, starting conversations. How do we get to know people? Talk to people. And I said, you have to, here's a list of people you must, like, they're going to tell you to F off and all that stuff. But here's the booker of this bar, here's the booker of this venue, here's the promoter here, and so on. But on social, like, and they're doing it through Facebook, I got a mathematical equation, and it's this. Whatever the capacity of the room is, you need twice as size of guest list. So in this, or sorry, 3 times the size of guest list. So a 200 cap room, we needed 600 people on guest list because only 30% show up actually. To get 600 people, they had to invite 1,200 people. So they actually had to talk to 1,200 people to get 600 people to get a capacity crowd out. And at first, when I say this sort of plan to artists, they're like, oh, but what about the door money and stuff? I'm like, nobody knows you here, and nobody is going to buy a ticket. There will be a ticket price, yes, and there's some people that walk up and buy it, but there's nothing better than a full capacity room and people can't get in, and that's your first show. And nobody knows who you are. With social, with 200 people in the room, that means photos and videos are being shared online, and that's marketing you can't pay for. What we also found is this, that when you give an experience to somebody and they don't know you and it's their first experience, it's elevated, like, wow, I didn't expect this, because they had no expectations. They want to support. So almost like 20% would come to us and say, do you have merch? I really want to support the band. And so instead of trying to get, I looked at it as, and this is kind of my digital background, and I'll tie it together, but that entry cover charge is a barrier. Who's playing? They don't know. What's the fee? $10. They're walking away. We get them in and they want to support. That t-shirt is twice as much as what they would have paid at the door. So 20% of 200 people buying something that's double the amount of the door is actually worth a lot more than getting door money, splitting the door money between 2 other bands and paying a door person fee. So get people in, we sold the merch. Social media goes out. And then when they start inviting people again, oh, I think this is something I heard about. And so they had to do it 3 times. And we actually found that the maybes, like this is where I said the singer was really on the ball. He created a spreadsheet with every name that he invited. And he had a yes, no, maybe. So the no's, we don't bother again. Maybe we'll invite 2 shows later. And the strategy of growth of audience is you have to invite a new 30% each and every time. What's the worst thing that could happen? Well, in 3 shows, inviting 1,200 people each time, you have the potential of 3,600 people, and they're going to tell people, and it's this exponential growth. And by the end of the year, we had people coming to us, hey, could they play this show? Could they do this? Could they do that? We actually turned down 25 show offers immediately. And wow. Yeah, and we got a booking agent right away. They toured North America twice. And then we thought, let's go to a new market. Toronto was the market we built them in, but Montreal was the next closest one. And we were able to do some research, find a band that sells out in Montreal every time, and call them and say, do you want a Friday night sold out in Toronto? And we'll do a swap. We'll take a Saturday in Montreal. So we went to the second market with sold out shows as well.
But you partnered with someone that was successful there and gave something of value up in your city, right? That's exactly it. You got some value to get some value. And I think, most musicians, in fact, all musicians I know, are playing to an audience. They want to get their work out, their music out to people. They want to see people. And the audience wants to see them. They want to connect. It's a natural connection that I think gets stifled many times by price or inconvenience or what have you. And it was one of the things that, when I founded Vest, we were looking at the music publishing model and thought, how come it's all B2B, right? Why are all music rights held by either
Right.
big media conglomerates, and all they do is license to other brands or other media companies? Where's the public, right? How does a fan who loves that artist or loves that song, how do they participate in that? So we took, the publishing catalogs, it might be $200 million catalog, and said to the artist or the rights holder, you can put in as little as 1%. And then the fan, and said, look, you can buy in for as little as $5. So it was a pro rata. You might own 0.0002% of something, but you can actually now share in the royalty stream that comes. And it was the first time anybody fractionalized music rights and involved the public in that equation, which I still think is a big hole, right? The music publishing market right now, you're seeing companies like Hypnosis and Primary Wave and Reservoir and everybody gobbling up catalogs are paying 15 to 30x EBITDA earnings on it. But they're still not touching the public. It's like they're trading behind the scenes under the table at wholesale. And I had a text conversation with Merck a little while ago, and I said, you guys need to bring a retail valuation to a wholesale business model. And I think now that everybody's gobbled up, the majority of large catalogs, and they're still gobbling, but you're going to see someone going, hey, the paradigm has to change. How do we actually bring more value to these music rights? And I think a lot of that's going to be a retail perspective versus a wholesale perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree. The access an artist or manager has direct to fans now is easier than ever before. And, barriers are down. And I think that this is a way that fans can, like I talked before, trying to be part of building that story. This is a way a fan can be part of building a story of a release. Like this song, I own part of it. I'd like you to sort of talk a little bit more about Vest, because some people might not know exactly what Vest is.
It was literally formed out of that basis. I mean, we looked at how music publishing was structured, how artists had a problem monetizing their work. And unless you got a publishing deal or had a successful run as an artist or sync licensing business, you really couldn't monetize your work, even if you had 1,000 or 10,000 fans. We thought, what if your own fans could actually participate with you, right? Not just a liner note mention or a shout out in a video, but actually earning alongside you, right? What if you could share a percentage, as little as 1% of your earnings with your fans? So at scale, and this hasn't happened yet, but at scale, if a social influencer, say like a Jake Paul, who's got 22 million YouTube viewers, said, hey, I really like that new song by artist X out of Calgary, right? And they made a deal and said, hey, artist X is going to give Jake Paul 10% of the earnings on the song. And Jake Paul went out to 22 million followers, or subscribers actually, not just followers, and said, hey guys, let's jump in. Everybody put $5 in on this song, right? If even 10%, if you had 2.2 million people jump in, it's a lot of money, right? And that influence, that power of a social influencer partnered with a creator, like a music creator, like a musician or a band, that hasn't really happened yet that I've seen at large scale. But when it does, it's going to be really powerful, and it's going to drive income to the creators instead of to, the inefficiencies of the music business where you see a lot of this being lost. So we just thought it was a way for fans to connect directly with the creators of the music, and both of them sharing together in really the proceeds of the success of the music.
Yeah, I think like you said, we haven't really seen it yet, but I think as we're moving forward in the digital space, we're going to see more niche type markets created. It's the same kind of thing, like just simply like whatever I listen to on Spotify, that's what's suggested to me. And like-minded people start finding each other and building these online communities. I think that there's going to be a lot of interesting things that happen where artists will find their people, and there'll be more collaborations, more creation, but it's going to be very exciting. And I do want to lead into, I know it's the time here, into the metaverse side of it, because I think that's going to be a huge portion of it. And I know you've got something to say.
Yeah, it is it's the logical progression. We've had conversations about this. We're doing a metaverse conference in Los Angeles called Future Worlds in November, and it's futureworlds.co if anybody wants to look. But we realize the value to artists again and how this works across music in particular. And we had a conversation with one of the guys in a band called Steel Panther, which some of you may know, and he got it in a second. We said, we can build you a virtual arena or virtual club where you can perform to as many as millions of people 24/7. And he said, can we build condos on top of that venue? And I thought, all right, he gets it, right? So maybe the biggest Steel Panther fans want to have a place to live virtually on top of this club, so they can go downstairs and see the band anytime they want, and then bring some friends back for an after party at their place. This sounds crazy, right? And people look at the metaverse today as a game, but the retail opportunities, the virtual real estate opportunities, the branding opportunities, the entertainment opportunities are going to be second to none. I mean, to me, it's as much a change as what email did to communications as, this is going to do for where you are now. It's going to make your life much more efficient. It won't be exactly the same, obviously, as real life, but you'll be able to go to places that you can't go in real life quickly at almost no money and experience things in a way and meet people, bring your friends with you, which I think is a big bonus. Right now, most online transactions are one-to-one. You're dealing with the computer, you're buying something, they send it to you. What if you could go shopping with your friends, right? What if your friends could go to a concert with you? What if you could have an after party or a dinner or a barbecue with anybody you wanted to invite anywhere in the world? That stuff's coming really quickly. And I think you know this, Darryl. We talked about this.
Yeah, it is coming really quickly. I mean, 2 points that I would say is that one of our guest speakers represents a Vac in Life, which is kind of like a Roblox, and they've been opening up live music events, but also to like emerging artists. And again, through some of the connections through our indie community, 2 artists from Portugal got to perform. And it's the kind of thing where the video stays online for 24 hours. And in that 24 hours, 10 million people were able to interact with their video content. And that's what's starting to happen. And I think a lot of people are thinking like, how could I use this? Well, think of like in Toronto, there's the Horseshoe Tavern. That's one of the places you want to play. So there's going to be these spaces that are built that have a built-in audience, where I think a lot of people are thinking, I need to build it and build the audience at the same time. But here's like this online venue, and they already have that built-in audience and that power. And so I think that's going to be part of it. And the other part is that at South by Southwest this last year, holograms were the big thing. And so you could literally stand in front of this machine. It takes a full body scan in 2 minutes. There's your hologram exactly like you. And it's watching you where you move, and it does the exact same thing. And just like Instagram filters, they would have filters, and it's like, there you have the face paint of Joker. There you dressed like a devil, all these kinds of things. And what I've been getting on my Instagram ads sent to me lately is about fashion. And so you can now take body scan, and then what does this look like on me? I can see it exactly, and then purchase it. So exactly. Online buying experiences are going to change drastically.
DressX, run by a couple of women, I think they're in LA, but they're all about the digital skins. And think about how less expensive it is to design and produce a fashion line, right? You used to have to go and buy 10,000 units and have it stored or shipped somewhere. Now you can go, look, if no one likes this, I'm going on to the next one, right? But creating these digital clothing lines almost instantly, I mean, it takes a minute, but then you have the ability to wear whatever you want, wherever you want, globally in the metaverse. And we're just scratching the surface. And again, I think that's why building a community and having a conference together makes sense. And I know you and I have talked about bringing that to Toronto and doing some stuff in Canada on that side as well, because I think the iconic venue thing, like you mentioned, that's the key. People are building in the middle of a desert in a digital space, which who knows what that is, right? But if you know where the Whiskey is, or the Roxy is, or a club like a Horseshoe you mentioned, people know that, right? They already associate that with a certain band or brand or music or song or time, and they want to go there. So I think building iconic spaces makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and to just sort of finish on the fashion part, I could really see AI taking hold as well and being, here's the best clothing that would look best on you, and having that type of recommendations. I think we're just, like you said, scratching the surface. But if anything, I got to say about digital space is, and this is with artists about marketing and everything, do not delay. Waiting kills. You don't know who's watching, who's seeing, who's interacting, but I just know that if you don't have anything there, no one is. And it's exponential growth, and it's also exponential loss the longer you wait to get involved.
It's like getting into YouTube in 2005, right? The
Right.
longer you wait, the harder it is to get through that clutter with YouTube. And also, there's no right way. People are going to make mistakes all the time, right? And not everything you do or design in this nascent space is going to work. But knowing that, get out there and do it, because someone's got to put a flag down, and one of those things that you put down is going to make sense and probably stay there. But yeah, very good advice.
Yeah, just be willing to make those mistakes, and you know, you see all the motivational, you got to make 1,000 mistakes to make it the one right choice. I think that goes a lot on the digital space. You know, we're all learning as we go. And the other part is, tomorrow there's going to be a new online tool that changes the game. There's going to be new services that changes the game. You can't predict that. And it's sometimes going to be taken away as fast as it's here. You know, like we're talking about like streaming and stuff at times, but there was Napster, there was LimeWire, there's all of those tools back then. And then also you don't hear about it. MySpace was huge, and then you don't hear about it. I think being open to the new thing is what's also really important.
100%. And you know, be everywhere, right? I get a lot of artists going, which platform should I be on? I said, all of them, right? Do you want your song not on Apple Music, but only on Spotify? No, be on both of them, be everywhere. And I think in this new metaverse space, you want to try as many platforms as you can, because you don't know which one's going to hit for you, right? And certain audiences gravitate towards one over the other, and you don't even know why that is. So I think the safest thing is just to put your stuff out everywhere you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had to talk to a number of artists about distribution, especially talking about CD Baby and Downtown, and I always try to use metaphors that make sense in the real world so they can understand the online world. And I'd be like, you know, that time where I'm on a Greek island in the middle of nowhere, and I can go to the store. Oh, look, they have Coca-Cola. It's been distributed there, and it's found there. And that's the power of being everywhere, is that now more people have access, and all those little percentages add up. And that starts turning into buying power and negotiation power and such. And, you know, look at Coca-Cola, because literally everywhere in the world you can find it. And that's what distribution is all about. And so sometimes, like you said, when people are like, should I be here or there? Everywhere, be everywhere, because you just don't know.
Yep. And don't be afraid to put your stuff out when as you make it. People are like, oh, should I just make an album and wait a year? Like, no, people want to hear your stuff as soon as you have it. So
Yeah.
don't up and don't store up 50 songs and I'm going to release them every 4 months. You know, I think the newer model is I want to hear something new as often as possible.
And also the algorithms are at play. Spotify likes it when you're always releasing. And if you're one of those creators that's always putting stuff out, they will start pushing you up to be discovered and such.
100%. Tom, I don't know how we're doing on time. I think we're over an hour. I mean, happy to keep going, but let us know and if anybody has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I haven't seen anything directly as a question, but I think we've addressed a lot of things that have come through. Have you seen this, Darryl, the CD Baby?
Well, let me just jump in here for a second, guys. You guys are imparting wisdom and knowledge that you should be charging for. This has been fascinating. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared today. Some of these time-honored lessons that, you know, Steve, that you shared with Stone Temple Pilots early days, but back then that was groundbreaking stuff. And so that's a fascinating story, and they still apply to today, don't they?
Absolutely. Delivering value to your audience wins every time.
Always.
Darryl, I don't know how you do all you do. Do you sleep, 20 minutes a night hanging upside down in a closet somewhere?
Almost. I do. Yeah, I have an app, and I actually do know it's like my average is under 4 hours a night. So, but the thing is, like, music's been my passion. I've known since grade 6 this is what I want to do. Digital has been my passion as well. Like, I was a geek in school and making like programming, coding, computer games and stuff like that. And to be able to be in this era, I think this is the most exciting time to be in music. We've seen revenue growth that like never before over this last year. And I think that having the opportunity to connect with fans internationally, as easy as it is right now, is going to provide a huge growth factor for every levels of our business. And I think that we're just starting, and it's going to be supercharged over the next 5 years.
Well, before we wrap up, give us one more little promo for the upcoming Music Pro Summit and Indie Week, please.
For sure. Music Pro Summit is September 6th to 8th. It's online. Our app is Huva. And if you haven't been to any of our conferences, we've had nothing but positive responses on the platform. The content is up for 3 months. So even if you can't make it due to time zones or work or anything, people tune in for up to 3 months after, and they're still connecting. The biggest part is you actually have access to every attendee, every speaker to create a connection. And it's like having a Rolodex. I know that's dating me too, because that's before digital, but it's like having this ongoing Rolodex. And literally 3 months later, you could be like, hey, Steve, want to do a meetup? And you're able to make those types of connections.
Great. Well, we are out of time, sadly, but thank you very much for doing this. To both of you, keep doing what you're doing. This has been fascinating. To the audience, please come back. And also, please tune in to the Music Summit or Music Pro Summit that Darryl just mentioned, and Indie Week. Every single person on here today should be following these two guys. All right, folks, that's it. Signing off.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.
Thanks, Tom.
You see, Darryl. Take care, guys.